So here it is, the Land Rover Defender, an automotive icon for over 73 years, and still it inspires us to explore to this day. Hello viewers, and welcome to part 2 of the Defender film. Now, the car's here again. It's still a pretty nice day. I am wearing different clothes. This may lead you to believe that what will follow next in the video is shot today. And while some of it will be, unfortunately not all. You see, when Aaron and I filmed part 1, we actually filmed the entire video, and that was back in June. We put it in the edit. The first edit came out about 90 minutes. Turns out I really can waffle about this car. So for peace of mind, and realizing that nobody would want to watch a 90-minute video about a car, we didn't scrap it, but we've just lifted out the parts we felt important and showed them to you in part 1 and what will be part 2 and even part 3 to come. And there's a part 4 which is only loosely connected, but we'll talk about the parts later. So this video, part 2, starts and will feature other reshoots, elements where I am just here today filming by my lonesome, unfortunately, and archived footage from the previous day's filming back in June, which also correlates to the footage you've seen in part 1 and we'll see in part 2 and indeed in part 3. That was all filmed back in June. We are an amateur show, so unfortunately we've made it. The Defender video was our first video, so if you could be patient with us while we just figure things out. I promise future videos will not be in parts, and they will be, well, not doing in continuity reshoots. We did purposefully decide that I wouldn't be wearing the same clothes for the reshoots. Namely, we decided to own up to it, and we didn't think the weather would be nice. To be honest, this weather is fairly similar to what it was in June. It's cooler, luckily, but apart from that, the weather is the same, and I probably could have got away with the same clothes and maybe even fooling you, despite the different camera angle. But enough of what we've done and why we've done it. The Defender Part 2. As we can all see, the front end of the car is entirely flat. Now, on the Defender's radiator grilles, the fins of the radiator grille itself are indented for improved aerodynamic airflow to allow air into the radiator so it can perform its function. This is a departure from nearly every other car which has an indented front end of the car to allow aerodynamics so the car can cut through the air, and then the radiator grilles themselves are flat to allow the air into the radiator. The Defender is entirely reversed. Partly due to its design, it wants to be a box, which of course requires flat angles and straight lines, but also its utilitarian ways. By keeping the front end flat, it doesn't protrude any further than it has to for the engine itself. As we can see here, from the light fixture next to the radiator grille, they are entirely vertical at a perpendicular angle to the road, showing once more that the Land Rover Defender's front end has absolutely no thought of aerodynamic design when they built the car. Another fact about the Defender that differs from nearly every car: the bumper is one large piece of steel that is attached directly to the front of the chassis. It has no internal mechanisms to actually dampen the force of any impact that the bumper will take. Instead, it will transition all of that energy throughout the chassis of the car, which is not how modern cars are built for safety reasons. Another aspect of the iconic design is the angle at the front of the roof. You may imagine this is due to aerodynamics, but in fact it is due to a differential between the floor height in the front and the rear of the car. This differential would mean that had Land Rover kept the roof height constant, then any passengers in the rear of the car would have had their heads squashed against the roof. To allow comfortable and full spines of a grown adult in the back, they raised the roof height. This meant that there was a differential in the roof height that had to be equated, so they added an angled roof over the front of the car. So here we see the Defender roof from a bird's eye point of view, and as the labels will be showing you, there are indeed different sections. This is actually because the entire roof, unlike cars of today, is not one solid piece, but all of the pieces you see before you, and they're all bolted together. This can be taken further in that they can all be unbolted, and every Defender can in fact have its entire roof taken off. Indeed, the sides, which we'll show you later, can also be removed, creating a pickup-like effect. As you can see in the video, the gutter runs around the length of the top of the car and is not used as most gutters are to collect water. Instead, this gutter is here to allow attachments for the roof of the car with minimal effort, allowing the car to be even more customizable. As you can see on your screen now, these are just some examples of what owners have and will keep attaching to the roof of Defenders, allowing them to be ever more customizable and utilitarian. As was mentioned when we were discussing the roof, here we see the panel gap where the side of the car can be lifted off, opening up the back and making the station wagon Defender into a pickup. Here we see the back of the car. Like the front, it is entirely flat, and the door, unlike most boot doors, opens as a conventional door to the side instead of upward. This is predominantly so that a full-size spare wheel can be mounted to the rear door, which is beneficial as the full-size spare has many advantages over space-saving spare wheels, which would prohibit you to travel long distances or at great speed. So it allows you to have peace of mind, and if you're in the middle of nowhere and have to change your wheel, you don't have to worry. So with all the aesthetics that we've just looked at, various mentions to the rear of the car, the flat surface, and as promised at the beginning of the video, now let's go take a look inside. This configuration of the TD5, like its predecessors, the 300 TDI, the 200 TDI, the 90, the 110, and I believe the Series Defenders, if they had seats in the back. The Series 1 definitely didn't, the Series 2 sort of did, the Series 3 kinda not. They all had this type of scenario where the seats were laid out like a bench along the back of the bulkhead of the car, and then they just fold down quite simply, and then you have this lovely leg that you put here, then you sit down, and you have a lovely non-inertial lap belt. Let me get in and demonstrate what I mean by that. You sit in the seat like this, then you plug your seatbelt in, and that's their job. There's no self-pulling back the seatbelt. In fact, this seatbelt really does need adjusting for me, because that's quite a bit of give, and I can move around a lot, so in an accident, that's not going to save me a lot. Now, all these seats have lap belts, and all of these seats have non-inertial lap belts, and that was one of the safety features that tried to have the car ended in 2013, that Land Rover quite adequately stopped the concern by saying it was an agricultural vehicle. Nonetheless, by this point, these were not the seats they were complaining about. Now on your screen right now, you're going to be seeing quite a big image of the interior of the back of the TDCi, the model after this one, and you'll see the seats aren't like these. Instead of four along the back, because if you can imagine 4 grown people back here, well, if we fold this seat down, there's very little leg room, and with 2 you could maybe get away with it like this, and then they put their seats there. But if these 2 seats are also occupied, you're all going to be very cramped, and it's not comfortable at all. So what they did was, in the TDCi, they did away with the seats at the sides and went for instead 4 down to 2 seats. Now these seats could fold down fully flat with the backs coming down onto the seat, and then they folded up into the sides. But then when you fold these away like so, you still get quite a nice big spacious loading area where you can throw nearly anything in. But with the TDCi, and as you can see on your screen, when the seats were folded away, they took up quite a bit of space even folded up. And obviously when folded down, there were 2. And they came down here, and it made very little sense for Land Rover to keep this configuration of facing each other, sitting on the side. So instead, they went for the more modern configuration of facing forwards. So that entire area became foot space, and your boot, well, imagine an imaginary wall about here, it became tiny and very unuseful, which is why almost every TDCI was very much not used in a 90 configuration as a station wagon, which is the type of model this is. No, in fact, they were normally, station wagons were nearly all used as 110 wheelbases, because then you had an extra row of seating and then these seats, so the two rear seats nearly always stayed up. No, instead you had country wagons or utility wagons where these windows didn't exist and these seats didn't either, and this was just wood for literally throwing things. People weren't allotted to sit in the back, and safety wise therefore you couldn't. There were many other iterations. You could have a pickup truck type where the roof would instead be right behind the front driver's seats and this entire area would be exposed. This was available both in the 90 and the 110 wheelbases with cab options. These cars were highly customizable. Why? As I explained earlier, this is a chassis which makes up, it's the rear of the car's chassis, which makes up also the rear bumper. Now most cars these days are built of a unibody. The bodywork and the chassis are all parts of the same thing. But back in the 40s, when the Series 1 was made and it continued down its lineage, you made a car in two parts. You made the chassis, which was very much the skeleton of the car, which you had your engineering components, so your engine, your gearbox, your wheels, your suspension, your brakes, all of that was connected to your chassis. And then you had your bodywork, which was known as a tub, which was attached to your chassis at mount points, and then you decked it out with a nice interior and a nice radio and this and that. And you go back inside the car. Obviously the boot opens a bit differently to everyone else. It's a whole door and not a swooping upward door. This was again for convenience of just loading. And obviously it allows you to put the giant, fully sized spare wheel on the back. Most cars these days instead would have a compartment below the boot floor with your small space saver wheel, which has restrictions. You can't drive over 100 miles on it and you can't go above 50 miles per hour. Not so. This is a full-size spare wheel. It's a wheel on the car, so you can just change it, no problem, and it doesn't impede any of your tasks that you'd like to perform. Now you can actually see in this car, it's rather embarrassing. I had hoped to have this changed by now. There's no headlining. There is a reason. I have leaks. Nearly every Land Rover has leaks. I've been in the process, I say I, a nice man in Farnham has been fixing it for me, but during this process the headlining had to come out and be repaired, and it's still at that garage being repaired now. I had hoped, this was several weeks ago, it would be fixed by now, but you can't rush these things. This is fortunate though, because it can actually strip it back so you can see the entire interior for you. And I'd quite like Aaron for you to please zoom in on the sunroof. When he does, what you'll see, viewers, is a rather unusual sight. You'll see the frame for the sunroof is extremely thick. The reason for this is simple. That is an aftermarket sunroof. Land Rover never made this car designed to have a sunroof. If you go now to Land Rover, however, a sunroof is a very reasonable request. But back in the days of 2000 when this car came out, and in 2007 when the TDCI was made, sunroofs, they were luxurious items. They weren't for a Defender. So a lot of people put these in aftermarket wise, and when the headlining is in, you'll see it's just been cut out. Literally, they just traced where the sunroof would go, and they got some scissors and they cut the headlining out. And that is the type of rugged modification you'd make to this car. They were designed to be modified. If I close the boot back up, one of the holes down here is for a ladder to be fitted that would go all the way up top to where a roof rack would be fitted. That's what this lip is for right here. Around the front, as I'm sure you saw, there's a snorkel which acts as a raised air intake. And as I was saying, this raised air intake is in fact also a customized modification. What would normally be is this wouldn't exist, and instead where this metal plate is, you would have a mesh plastic area, and that's for air intakes. Obviously the design here allows the air to be taken in from up here, meaning the car can wade through water a great deal deeper than if the air intake was here, because, well, to save you the engineering terms, if water gets into an air intake, a significant amount of water, then water gets into your engine when your cylinder compresses, and that can crack your engine block, which point it's probably cheaper to actually just buy a new car. Unless you come out one of these Defenders, when it's actually probably cheaper to just buy a different engine. It swings and roundabouts as to which car you're talking about. In the 2007 year, when, that's a very weird way to talk about a year. In 2007, when the TDCi came out, the exterior got very little done to it. It was the interior that got a lot. Namely, the whole comfort side of life really changed. Land Rover had to evaluate and basically say they want comforts now. It's just expected in a car. So air conditioning was added as an optional extra by the factory instead of having to take it to another garage and get it fitted third party after you bought the car. A more advanced radio was fitted, comfortable seats were fitted, leather interior was an option on a Defender. Who knew? Also, heated seats were an option, along with automatically winding down windows. All such lovely things which this car really could do with and doesn't have. Along with obviously the change to the rear, which I've already discussed. Likewise, when you saw the different interior for this rear on your screens, you'll now see an option for a different interior on your screens for the front. And if we just open this door back up, you can see quite how they differ from what's on your screen for the TDCi interior to what this type of interior is. But hey, there were 7 years in between the creation of this car and the creation of the car you just saw. Highly customizable. And yes, this car has its problems. The heating up here, controlled by these levers, is absolutely terrible. I don't believe there is an actual heater. I believe that what happens is the engine in there gets very, very warm, and when it's warm enough, the air in the conduits that feed these vents heats up, and that's what forms your hot air. As such, for the first 20 minutes, the heating is non-existent, and on a very cold day, it's very, very, very hard to set off. Especially if you need to demist, you need to wait about 30 minutes before that works. Hence why it's really advisable to keep these things inside so you just don't get demisting problems. Thanks very much for watching with us. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. This was part 2. I do hope it wasn't too boring for you, and I am sorry if it wasn't as exciting, but the next part 3, we are driving, and I promise that will be more exciting. Part 3, as I say, is driving. It will predominantly be archive footage. After that, there's part 4, otherwise known as the history of Land Rover. That will be out in a few weeks' time. It's loosely connected to this, only so much as we actually explore this car's heritage and its history, and as the name suggests, it's the history of Land Rover itself. So that won't be connected very heavily with this. That's another green screen. It was fun to film. And that'll be out later after some other car videos. So part 3 is really the only one left to watch. And stay tuned. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notifications to our YouTube channel so you'll see when we put up other videos, or give a follow to our Facebook and our Instagram pages if you don't also. There's our link tree which will be shown in this video, probably somewhere around here right about now. Give that a click. It'll also show you to our TikTok. We don't use it much, but we do endeavour to make it as revealing as possible for our fans. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time in part 3. Bye.